Hi and Assalamualaikum to Sir Said. We are from class AC 1105B. So today we will explain about purchases and payment cycle. Me, myself, Anik Danish and Aina Najwa will explain about introduction of the topic. Then, to members, which is Farah Yasmin and Fatan Amira, will explain about the documents that are available for purchases and payment cycle.
Next, the members that are going to explain about the internal control part are Shahirul Azri and Amir Hilmi. Adlin Sofia and Shafiq Haziq will explain on how to audit the purchases and payment cycle. Lastly, for the past year question, Nurul Najihah and Dini Najwa will explain. Next, I will explain about what purchases and payment cycle is. Purchases and payment cycle primarily concern with the ordering, receiving and payment of goods. This cycle is considered as a high-risk cycle because there is cash involvement. According to the International Standards of Auditing (ISA), cash carries an inherent fraud risk. The activities of purchases and payment cycle are the requisitioning goods and services, preparing purchase orders, receiving, inspecting and storing the goods, and preparing payment vouchers and recording. The objective to audit the purchases and payment cycle is to evaluate whether the account affected by the purchase of goods and services and the cash payment for those purchased are fairly presented in accordance with Generally Accepted Accounting Principles (GAAP). Apart from that, the objective to audit the cycle is to state the general audit procedures for the test of internal controls of the cycle. One of the main activities of purchases and payment cycle is the process of ordering goods. The first step of the process is by requesting a complete requisition form from the department, requesting the procurement department to purchase specific items. Upon receiving the requisition, a buyer within the procurement department will source the required goods. Next, the buyer should have the list of approved suppliers that provides goods at the best price. Next, in order to amend the list of approved suppliers, the approval of the chief buyer should be obtained. Once supplier is selected, a pre-numbered purchase order must be completed and approved by the chief buyer. This is to avoid risk of buyer buying from another supplier because they are receiving kickbacks or commissions. After that, copies of the purchase order must be provided to the supplier and to the receiving department to be filed numerically. Once the order has been placed, the focus now shifts to the receiving function.
So the next one I will explain about receiving function. So the first one, the delivery clerk of suppliers delivers goods. The receiving clerk must agree the reference per the supplier delivery note to a numerical field order to ensure goods received were correct. Second, once verified, receiving clerk should perform a superficial quality check. Then, goods not taken into receipt must be clearly indicated on the supplier's delivery note, and both receiving clerk and delivery clerk sign off the amendments made. The fourth one, there should be a surveillance cameras where the goods are received. The fifth, if goods are returned, a pre-numbered credit note must be complete and must be approved by the purchases manager. Next one, once the received clerk accepted the delivery, sign off the supplier delivery note, made amendment, a pre-numbered good received note must be completed of actual quantity of goods taken received. The seventh one, goods received note cross-reference to relevant purchase order and delivery note. The last one, copies of this cross-reference document must be sent to the accounting department for recording transaction. Preparation of payment function is one of the main activity in purchases and payment cycle. So the first one, a payment requisition is prepared by the creditor's clerk after inspection of the documentation received from the recording clerk. The second one, a reconciliation should be performed by the creditors clerk whereby the monthly creditors statements received from the creditors are reconciled to the invoice received from the supplier as well as payment made to creditors. Once the clerk is confident of the amount outstanding, the clerk can then request payment by means of payment requisitions. The next one, all documents supporting the payment should be present before a payment requisition should be effected. The main purpose of this function is to make sure only valid creditors are paid on time and the correct amount.
Hi everyone, I'm Farah Yasmin and now I'm going to explain to you guys about document and activities in the purchases and payment cycle. There are 10 documents in the purchases and payment cycle, which is purchase requisition, purchase order, receiving report, debit note, vendor's invoice, vendor statement, voucher, voucher register, check register, and last but not least is creditor's ledger. The first document that I will explain is about purchase requisition. So, what is purchase requisition? Let's check it out. Purchase requisition is a document used when an employee needs to make a purchase or an order request on behalf of their company. It is the first step in the purchasing process, so they need to inform department manager so that the purchasing department can start the purchasing process. As you can see from the sample of purchase requisition form on the slide, they outline details such as product description, product quantity, and also the price of the product. Approval of purchase requisition may take some time, so it might cause delay in getting goods or service order. Next, what we have here is purchase order. I'm going to explain to you guys about purchase order. A purchase order or PO is an official document that buyers send to seller to document the sale of product and services to be delivered at a later date. It is issued by the purchasing department after a purchase requisition has been made and passed the approval process. This allows buyer to place orders with supplier without immediately making payment. However, the buyer is legally obligated to pay for the products and services when they have been delivered. So as we can see in the purchase order sample in the slide, they outline details such as quantity, unit, description, and also unit price. The third document that I will explain to you guys is about receiving report. So what is a receiving report? Let's find out. A receiving report is used to document the contents of a delivery to a business. The document is used to record what materials and inventory received by the company. Other than that, it is also to indicate the quantity of goods received. The form is filled out by a receiving staff of the company after accepting the delivered goods. After that, the copy of the receiving report is sent to other departments to notify them what items have been received and are ready for use. Information such as date and time received, the name of the shipping company, the name of the items, and also the quantity of the items are included in the documents. Before this, I've explained to you guys about receiving report. Now, what do we have here? A debit note. Let's hear the explanation. So, a debit note, or also known as debit memo, are generally used in a business-to-business transaction. It is issued from a buyer to their seller to indicate or request a return of funds due to incorrect or damaged goods received, purchase cancellation, or other specified circumstances. If you, a buyer, purchase from a seller or supplier and you would like to return the goods for any valid reason, you can issue a debit note. For return items, the note will include the total anticipated credit, and inventory of the return items, and the reason for their return. Now, we will move on to the fifth document. I'm going to explain to you guys about vendor's invoice. A vendor invoice is a document listing the amounts owed to a supplier by the recipient. When a customer orders goods and services on credit, the supplier prepares an invoice and issues it to the customers. This vendor's invoice contains not only a listing of the amounts owed, but also any sales taxes and freight charges. It also contains the date by which payment should be made and where to send the payment.
Hi, my name is Fatih Amira. So I'm going to continue with the sixth document, which is vendor statement. Okay, a vendor statement is prepared by vendors showing the beginning balance, purchase, payments to the vendor, and ending balance. It stated the invoice that we purchased from the suppliers. Basically, vendor statement is a monthly statement that's sent by vendor to the client company to show how much the balance that we're supposed to pay and how much we already settled. For the seventh document is voucher. Okay, when we heard about voucher, we must think that the voucher that we get from the shopping mall, Foodpanda, GrabFood, and so on, like the discount card, but it is different in audit. So in audit, voucher is a list of documents, list of invoice that we're supposed to take. It summarizes the details of the purchase transaction, which serve as basis for recording and approval of payment. We have multi-transaction in a day, so instead of having one record for each invoice or each transaction, we will use the technique of voucher, which will be much easier. Okay, for the next document is voucher register. Voucher register is a journal that records all vouchers once they are approved. It lists down the invoice that we have balance on it, so it will have letter for reviewing and documentation. For example, if a manager wanted to examine the purchase order and invoice from a particular supplier, he could look up the voucher in the voucher register for that vendor and see what purchases were approved on the different dates throughout the period. The manager can then go to the voucher files and examine the source document for the individual transaction, like the purchase request, purchase approval, and cash disbursement approval. Okay, for the ninth document is check register. Check register is a document which is stated the payment date, check number, payment amount, and payee names for all the check payments. It records all payments in this register. It is same like voucher register, but this one is using check. Okay, for the last document is creditor's ledger. Creditor's ledger boasts all purchases and cash payments transactions to individual account in this account payable subsidiary ledger. The purpose is to provide knowledge about which suppliers the business owes money and how much. Okay, that's all for the 10 document for purchase.
Name is Shahirul Azri. So now we are going to learn about internal control objective and control procedure for purchases. As we all can see here, there are 5 objectives, which are occurrence, completeness, accuracy, cut-off, and classification. For the first one is occurrence. Recorded purchases represent items actually acquired. Vouchers for payment of purchases should be supported by proper documents such as purchase orders, receiving reports, and vendors' invoices. And purchase transactions are properly authorized. There should be procedure for authorizing and approving requisitions, purchase orders which are including prices and terms, receipt of goods and transfer of goods to inventory. An independent employee should review the authorizations and match the vendor invoices with supporting documents. The second one is completeness. All sales transactions are recorded. Purchase orders, receiving reports and vouchers should be pre-numbered. Numerical sequence is periodically accounted for by an independent employee. Copies of purchase orders and receiving reports should be forwarded to the accounting department to be matched with vendor invoices. Third, accuracy. Purchases are recorded at the proper amounts. There should be procedure for independent internal verification of vendor invoices as to quantities received, prices, terms, extensions, and footings. Journal entries and postings should be based on approved supporting documentation. Next is cut-off. Purchases are recorded in the proper accounting period or correct date. There should be procedures for invoicing and recording sales as soon as a transaction is effected. Year-end purchases cut-off should be independently reviewed. And the last one is classification. Purchases are recorded in proper accounts. Purchases journal and general ledger should be reviewed. We should use chart of accounts to ensure proper classification. That's all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amir Hilmi and I'm going to explain about internal control objectives and control procedures for payments. There are 4 objectives that we should know, which are occurrence, completeness, accuracy and cutoff, and classification. So the first one is occurrence. Recorded cash payments represent cash actually paid to vendors. This means there should be separation of duties between handling cash and record keeping. Pre-numbered checks should be used and numerical sequence should be accounted for routinely, including unissued checks. The second one is cash payments are properly authorized. There should be procedures for approval of payment before signing of checks by authorized persons. Vouchers and supporting documents should be cancelled for each issue. The second one is completeness. All cash payments are properly recorded. Checks should be pre-numbered and accounted for, both used and unused. Bank reconciliations should be prepared by an independent employee. There should be a system of review of any discrepancy in the above procedures by a supervisory personnel. The third one is accuracy and cut-off. Cash payments are recorded at the proper amount and in the proper accounting period. There should be internal verification comparing checks with payment records as to payee, amounts, and date. The fourth one is classification. Cash payments are recorded in proper accounts. Account codes on vouchers should be reviewed. That is all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Right now, I'm going to explain in detail about test of control. So what is exactly test of control? It is form of an audit procedure that tests on the company's effectiveness of their internal control in order to prevent and detect material misstatements. This is because the internal controls have the influence on their financial statement. If the firm has strong controls and the management has been implementing them efficiently, it relatively have low risk of the chance of the misstatement happen in the financial statements. So apa yang nak disampaikan dekat sini, dia test of control ni adalah satu prosedur lah dalam audit untuk detect kesalahan yang mungkin dilakukan dalam audit tersebut. So bila company ni dia implement control yang kuat dalam syarikat dia punya kadar untuk kesalahan tu berlaku dalam financial statement tu rendah sebab dia dah kawal dengan elok lah gitu. So next one is about common audit procedures for test of control. First is the observation. Observation is the process of looking at the procedures that are being performed by the client. For example, this type of test of control is done by observing the inventory counting procedures that are being performed by the client at the year end. This is to make sure the internal control of inventory exists and the procedures are as described Apa yang dimaksudkan dekat sini observation ni, bila klien tu dia prepare financial statement ni, kita as auditor ada dekat situ untuk make sure yang financial statement tu ada dan prosedur yang diorang lakukan tu sebiji lah dengan apa yang diorang cakap tu. Next is the inquiry. Inquiry is the process of asking for an explanation from the client relating to the control process or transaction. For example, we may ask the client's personnel for an explanation about inventory accounting procedures at year end. So apa yang dimaksudkan inquiry ni, kita ni bertanya lah dekat klien tu yang relate lah dengan control process or transaksi yang dilakukan. So ni adalah untuk make sure apa yang diorang buat tu betul lah, seperti yang describe tu. So next one is the inspection. Inspection is the process of examination of supporting documents related to control procedures. As for example, as an auditor, we may inspect the bank reconciliation report to make sure it exists and the procedures are as described. Inspection ni bezanya dengan observation dengan inquiry ni. Observation dengan inquiry ni macam kita tak sentuh lah benda tu. Tapi bila inspection ni kita semak benda tu. Semak ada ke kesalahan, betul ke apa yang dia cakap tu, seperti yang dia describe, betul ke masuk ni, betul ke ada salah ke tak. Tu apa yang dimaksudkan dengan inspection. Inspection ni lagi satu dia punya, bila kita inspect ni kita dapat physical evidence yang control procedures yang dilakukan tu adalah kenalah dengan apa yang klien cakap tu. Finally is the performance. Performance ni is the process of auditors performing the control procedures that were performed by the client. As an example, we may perform the bank reconciliation that was performed by the client's accountant. The performance is the most reliable type of test of control and provide better assurance comparing to the other types. This is due that we gather the direct evidence on how the control works when we use performance. Basically apa yang maksudkan dengan performance ni, kita sebagai auditor ni kita buat balik apa yang klien tu buat. Kita buat balik lah daripada awal sampai ke akhir. Bagusnya bila kita buat performance ni, kita akan gather evidence dengan lebih banyak. Sebab kita buat balik daripada awal, kita tahu kalau macam kita buat ni kat sini kita buat betul and dekat klien sediakan tu salah, kita dapat betulkan kat situ juga. So macam tu lah. So right now I'm going to explain about example test of control in purchase transaction. So first one is select a sample of purchase orders and inspect evidence that have been approved and matched with purchase regulation, vendors invoices and receiving reports and are cancelled upon payments. The next step is to review the client's accounting for numerical sequence of purchase order, receiving reports and vouchers. Test check sample. So dekat sini apa yang kita boleh nampak, dia apa test of control yang saya telah explain sebentar tadi. Kita boleh nampak dekat sini yang dia buat inspection untuk mencari evidence lah. Next step is select a representative sample from file of receiving reports. Vouch to related purchase orders and purchase requisition, vouch to vendors invoice. Next one is examine supporting documents for evidence of supervisory review and approval. So apa yang dimaksudkan dekat vouch ni, dia confirm lah, dia macam dia nak affirm apa yang related dengan benda purchase order tu betul-betul ada. Number 4 is select a representative sample of transaction from the voucher register. Vouch prices to purchase order or approve vendor price list, perform recalculations of extensions and footings. Compare voucher register total to general ledger posting. So dekat sini kita pada fahaman saya mungkin ada reperformance yang berlaku di sini. Okay, number 5 is ask about and observe the inspection and accounting procedures for receiving and storing goods. Dekat sini kita boleh nampak lah yang dua common audit procedure yang saya sebut tadi, iaitu observe and inspection dilakukan dan dijalankan. And number 6 is review appropriateness of segregation of duties. So bila dah siap test of control tu, kita nak review balik betul appropriate ke benda ni. Segregation of duties membawa maksud is concept of having macam mana nak cakap, dia macam tugas ni dibahagilah antara satu sama lain in order to prevent fraud and error. Okay, so another example test of control yang diceritakan dekat sini adalah based on payment transaction pula. So the first step is ask and observe the use of pre-numbered checks. Test the numerical sequence in the check register or cash payment journal and unused check. Dekat sini observe digunakan lah untuk pre-numbered check and test the numerical sequence. Second one is seek approval from the client to obtain a sample of cancelled checks from the bank. It is to examine for properly approved supporting voucher, agree to the amount of cancelled check and supporting voucher, examine supporting voucher for evidence of cancellation and vendor invoice, examine cancelled checks for authorized signatures, and last one, trace cancelled checks to the register and to account payable subsidiary ledger of the account. So the third one, you test the arithmetical accuracy of check register and compare the totals to general ledger posting, and final review procedures for the segregation of duties. So walaupun step dekat sini berbeza, tapi kita boleh nampak lah yang apa pun test of control ni dia adalah dalam untuk menyediakan satu financial statement tu. So apa step yang disebut tadi tu yang saya bacakan tadi, dia tak adalah dia macam keperluan untuk tahu. Tapi apa yang perlu kita tahu tu test of control, 4 common audit procedures tu, iaitu observation, inquiry, inspection, and the last one is reperformance. Sekian, terima kasih.
Assalamualaikum, I'm Adeline Sophia and I'm going to explain about substantive tests. There are 8 common audit procedures. Number 1 is inspection of documents. This refers to the right of a party to copy and examine the document of opposing party. Number 2 is physical inspection. This is a process of examining goods and making sure that they are according to the requirements of the law. Number 3, observation. It consists of looking at a process or procedure being performed by others. Number 4, confirmation. Confirmation is a specific type of inquiry, which is the process of obtaining a representation of information or an existing condition directly from a third party. Number 5 is reperformance. Reperformance is the auditor's independent execution of procedures or controls that were originally performed as part of the entity's internal control. Number 6, analytical procedures. Analytical procedures consist of evaluations of financial information through analysis of possible relationships among both financial and non-financial data. Number 7 is recalculation. It consists of checking the mathematical accuracy of documents or records. And the last but not least is inquiry. It consists of seeking information of knowledgeable persons, both financial and non-financial, inside and outside the entity. This procedure is used extensively throughout the audit and often is complementary to performing other audit procedures. Next is type of substantive test. There are two types, which are test of details and analytical procedures. For test of details, there are purchases and debit notes. Meanwhile, for analytical procedures, there are sales versus cost of sales, commission related to purchases, and purchases discount. Next is substantive test of purchases. First, we have to select a sample of transactions from the cash payment journal and vouch to supporting documents. Vouch here means provides evidence for occurrence. Second, select a sample of receiving reports and trace to entries in the voucher register and cash payment journal. Trace means provide evidence for completeness. Number 3 is to perform year-end purchase cut-off test. Next, perform recalculation on supplier invoices. And last but not least is to scan the purchases journal for large or unusual items. Next is substantive test for accounts payable. The first step is we need to obtain a trial balance of accounts payable. We have to verify arithmetical accuracy of subsidiary ledger accounts and agree total to generate ledger control. And then segregate amounts due to others from segregate trade creditors. Segregate means separate or sort out. And then scan trial balance for material debit balances. Number 2, test selected transactions in a sample of individual accounts payable. First, vouch to purchase orders, receiving reports, and vendors' invoices. And then trace credit entries in accounts to corresponding entries in purchases, inventories, expenses, or other records. The third one is trace debit entries to cash payment journal. The third step of substantive test of accounts payable is to confirm accounts payable balance with vendors or request vendor statements of unpaid invoices. Next, perform purchase cut-off test. Cut-off means transaction or events that have been recorded in the correct accounting period. For example, if the goods are delivered prior to year end, then they are included in the cost of goods sold and not inventory. Number 5, review payments subsequent to audit date and unpaid invoices for evidence of unrecorded liabilities. Last but not least, we have to review clients' reconciliation of subsidiary ledger to general ledger control account. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. I'm going to present to you on how to answer question 5 final exam on purchases and payment cycle. For example, let's look at December 2018 question 5. The acquisition and payment cycle involve a process of obtaining goods and services to operate a business. The cycle begins with initiation of purchase requisition and ends with a payment to the supplier. Identify any two audit procedures that can be performed by the auditor to ensure that the control procedures are properly implemented by the management within the acquisition and payment cycle. So the answer is examination, indication of cancellation, and examine procedure. B. Determine the function. Purchase requisition is an authorized employee requests the purchasing department of purchase goods by an authorized employee. Vendor statement is prepared by vendor showing beginning balance, purchases, payment for the vendor, and ending balance.
Hi, I'm Najiha. I'm going to explain the B question. B question is about situation-based question that we have to make our own judgment to answer it. And yeah, let's read the statement together. Kepada is a company involved in manufacturing the computers component located in Batu Calon Penang. As an auditor of the company, you are required to examine its acquisition and payment function. Whenever the production materials are required, the production assistant will fill in 2 copies of purchase requisition forms. A copy of the form will immediately be sent to the purchase department. Once received, the purchase clerk will contact the supplier from the list of suppliers in the database for order. 4 copies of per number purchase order will be generated from the purchasing system. Only order above 10,000 needs to be authorized by the purchase manager. After the materials have been received, the warehouse staff will compare the total on the goods received notes and the purchase order to ensure exact amount of material received. Then he will prepare 2 copies of receiving report as a reference for disbursement department to make payment. Upon receiving a copy of receiving report and the purchase order, the account clerk at the disbursement department will process the payment and prepare the check. Beforehand, all the supporting documents will be inspected by the accountant, and finally he will sign the check as approval for payment. At the end of the day, all the documentation will be filed accordingly. And then there's 3 questions that we need to be answered with our own judgment, which is discuss any 5 major weaknesses in the above internal control system, explain the possible effect of each weakness identified above, suggest a recommendation to overcome each weakness noted above. And the way to answer this question, you have to make a box following the format because it's easier. Okay. The first question is that 5 major weaknesses, so we are going to find 5 of the weaknesses together. Okay, the first one is that no supplier invoice before payment is made. This can be seen from this statement. The purchase clerk will contact the supplier from the list of suppliers in the database for order, and after that the supplier, there is no statement that the supplier give an invoice to the purchase clerk. Okay, the second one is that only purchase order more than 10k is authorized by the purchase manager. So we can see from the statement, this is the second weakness. And the third weakness is purchase requisition form is not authorized and immediately sent to the purchase department. This can be seen from this. A copy of the form will immediately be sent to the purchase department. The fourth weakness is that warehouse staff only compare total on goods received. You can see from here, the warehouse staff will compare the total on the goods received notes and the purchase order to ensure exact amount of material received. And lastly, the last weakness is that due to authorization for purchase below 10k, above 10k, I'm sorry, there is no proper recording of the order above 10k. So that means there's no, you can use this statement also, only order above 10,000 needs to be authorized by the purchase manager. On to the next slide, we are going to answer the other 2 questions, the possible effects and also the recommendation. Okay, for the first weakness, there is no supplier invoice before payment is made. The possible effect that might happen is that invoice might include unordered goods. Things that we do not order are included by the supplier so that they can gain profit without we know. And then the recommendation that we should do is that the company should request for an invoice from the supplier, and also supplier invoice must be approved and match the receiving report. And then the second weaknesses is only purchase order more than 10k are authorized. So the possible effect is that there might be missing good orders that we do not know, or also the possibility of unauthorized purchase being made. And then the recommendation that we should do is that all purchase order has to authorize regardless of the amount, because every purchases is important. So the third witness, purchase requisition form is not authorized and immediately sent to the purchase department. So what is going to happen is that the requests are made for unauthorized purpose because there's no one authorized the purchase requisition form. So then what we should do is that the requisition are authorized prior to approve before the request is made. And then the fourth witnesses, warehouse staff only compare total on the good received. So the possible effect that might happen is that the quantity and types of good received are not in agreement with the purchase order, because the warehouse staff only compare the totals and they do not see the quantity and types of the good received. So that will affect the business. So the recommendation is that all goods issued check against approved purchase order in the term of quantity and types of goods by independent personnel. And lastly, due to authorization for purchase more than 10K, there is no proper recording of the order under 10K. So the possible effect is that payment may be recorded incorrectly or there might be fraud happening. So the recommendation is that the payment of order under RM10K should be recorded also and also be authorized by the purchase manager. So that's it. I hope you guys understand how to answer the question. And yeah, goodbye.